Voyager II launched in 1977, a space probe fired into the deepest regions of the cosmos. Before its journey began, a team of scientists, led by Carl Sagan, placed on board the Golden Record. It was the ultimate time capsule, a glimpse into life on Earth. In its grooves, the record held 55 greetings in 55 languages. Humanity collectively calling into the abyss.
Hello from the children of planet Earth.
The record also held natural sounds, such as wind, rain, surf, laughter, and music from around the world. Still, there was more. A list of physics theorems and mathematical definitions, a map of the solar system and all of its planets, including Earth, images of animals, landmarks, as well as diagrams of human anatomy and evolution. Essentially, the Golden Record was a message in a bottle cast adrift on cosmic waves in hopes that someone or something would learn who we are and where we can be found. In 2012, Voyager finally left the solar system, taking that message into the cosmos. 6 months ago, the cosmos responded. They came for me in the dead of night, surrounding my house and pounding on the door, flashlights flaring through the windows. I grabbed my bat and crept towards the entrance. "Who's out there?" Broad-shouldered shadows moved behind the frosted glass panels. "Professor James Warbell, you're coming with us." They were government agents, the types with guns, the types you do not argue with. They drove their black SUVs like bats out of hell, and we reached the airbase in half an hour, and they bustled me straight into the back of a C-130 Hercules. I was the only passenger sitting in the empty cargo hold of that behemoth military plane, and I had to wonder, what on earth did the US government want with me, a physics professor specializing in acoustics? We landed on a hot tarmac in the middle of the desert. I had to shield my eyes from the sun as I walked down the ramp. An SUV ferried me across a dirt road toward an isolated collection of concrete buildings. In the distance, behind the buildings, there lurked a field of satellite arrays. The SUV dumped me at a security checkpoint where dozens of confused academics were waiting. Colleagues from across the country. I recognized them, tops of their fields, sweating in their wool cardigans and tweed jackets. Soldiers in desert camouflage and body armor escorted us into a central building. We passed through tight corridors with gleaming white walls, emerging in a circular situation room, computer stations everywhere, a wall full of monitors, a room where important people tracked important things. And there was a woman waiting to greet us, tall, with high cheekbones and a severe gaze. She looked like royalty to me. In some ways, she kind of was. Her name was Dr. Joanne Faraday, and she was the director of the SETI Institute. If you're unfamiliar with the acronym, that's the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute. She told us that we were here in response to an event, an unprecedented event. An object of unknown origin had entered our solar system. Appearing over the shoulder of Jupiter, it was on a trajectory toward Mars. Yet, when the Pan-STARRS array in Hawaii imaged the object, it disappeared, as if it had never existed. Then 5 minutes later it reappeared, but this time it was heading directly toward Earth. Thus, it was reasonable to believe that it was an autonomous object of intelligent design. No one knew what to say. Behind Dr. Faraday, one of the monitors held an image of the object, a mere speck against the vast storms of Jupiter. More soldiers escorted us to a series of bunkhouses. We were handed sheets and towels and pillows. It felt like prison. I was to share my cell with 3 others, Dr. Alexis Peterson, an astrophysicist, Professor Darnell Watkins, a theoretical mathematician, and Dr. Winnie Armo, a quantum physicist. "Dr. Peterson," Darnell began, You are the astronomer. What is your read on the situation? I'm not sure what to think, Alexis answered. What I do know is this. Today is the most important day in the history of human civilization. The object arrived 4 days later. Estimates put its average speed at over 2 million meters per second, and as it came closer, we sent it a signal, trying to get it to notice us. And it did. It vectored directly toward the base. Moving fast, sirens wailed as if we were under attack, like this wasn't the desired outcome. We all gathered at the edge of the desert, 500 meters from where it was going to land, and heavily armed soldiers had to keep us at bay as the object entered our atmosphere. It seemed to have no trouble at all, descending with the ease of a balloon floating to the ground. That first glimpse left a strong impression on me. A dark sphere with spikes protruding across the surface. Its outer shell reflected an iridescent sheen with the quality of an oil spill. The object landed on the desert floor, and that was that. First contact. Nothing came out of the object. No green man, no otherworldly being. It just sat there. No one was allowed near it until the proper tests were completed. They blasted it with every type of imagery they had. X-ray, infrared, thermal, ultrasound, magnetic, and hyperspectral. And the results were troubling. There was no way to see inside the object. The inner sphere had a protective shield that prevented internal imaging. However, they were able to determine that the outer shell and spikes were radioactive. Not at dangerous levels, they emitted a low level of alpha particles. No signs of beta or gamma radiation, and it was thus hypothesized that the shell was constructed using primordial super-heavy elements with near-eternal half-lives. The chemists spent several nights arguing about whether it contained element 122 or element 126, and in case you haven't studied the periodic table recently, you should probably know those aren't on there, which means that they were saying the object was made with elements that did not exist until now. A bright yellow containment structure was constructed around the object, and we were finally allowed to approach in groups of 5. Once inside, we stripped and were doused with sterilizer spray. Wearing vacuum-sealed positive pressure protective suits, we crossed into the center of the containment structure, and there it was. Just sitting in front of us. Alien technology. It felt much larger than I expected. Towering over us, it dominated the containment space. Monitoring equipment encircled it. Cables snaked away in all directions. The object made me feel small on a universal scale, and I couldn't help but wonder where it came from. You'll find academics like to do 2 things. They like to argue, and they like to drink. On the night after we visited the object, all of us were in the on-base bar. It was a hive, buzzing with excitement. We argued over theories on the object's origin and its method of propulsion. But most of all, we wanted to know why it was here. Someone suggested a military probe sent to discover intelligent life in our solar system. Another thought it might be a bomb sent to wipe out galactic competition. Then, Bob Stoltz cleared his throat. And when Bob Stoltz cleared his throat, the whole room leaned in to listen. He was an anthropologist and linguist from Berkeley. 88 years old, he sat with a hunched back and had a horseshoe of crazy white hair circling a wrinkled scalp covered in liver spots. Where has the hope gone? In 1977, when Voyager was sent into space, Dr. Sagan did not choose to put a weapon on board. He chose the golden record. He chose to communicate with our potential neighbors, to share with them all the important facts about life on Earth. Who is to say that our own mystery object is not itself a message from the cosmos? A cosmic record, if you will. That is all I have to say, I suppose. Let us leave room for hope. Stoltz was right, but like all scientific endeavors, it was a painfully slow process to come to that conclusion. First, the military was sent out with diamond-tipped power saws and drills. The drill bit snapped and the saw blades shattered. A hydraulic mining drill was driven into the containment unit and used on the object. The remains of that vehicle were dragged out on a sled. EOD technicians placed thermite breaching charges on the outer shell, stuff that could burn through the walls of the White House emergency bunker. It didn't even make a scratch. I think the military folk were the first of us to become truly afraid. It was clear that whoever built this object had defensive capabilities beyond imagination. And soldiers being soldiers, they started to wonder, what would their offensive capabilities look like? Other methods of interaction were proposed and employed: stimulation by electric current, a directed magnetic field, immersion in corrosive gases, direct contact with decaying radioactive material. I suggested blasting the thing with a combination of sounds at rising frequencies and volumes, but nothing provoked a response or corrupted the integrity of the outer shell. Finally, Professor Bob Stoltz came to the rescue, 88 years old, champion of hope. He volunteered to approach the object, wearing no protective equipment. His reasoning was thus: if he showed the object a sign of trust, it may reciprocate and then communicate. We watched on the cameras as he passed through the sterilization checkpoint. He was shuffling slowly, yet confidently, as he crossed into the central chamber, and he paused to admire the object. We watched with bated breath as he took careful steps forward. The object remained passive until he took his right hand and placed it on the outer shell. Within seconds, the object responded to biological contact. First, it began to emit a sound. And from that point onward, whenever anybody was close, it would play those tones again. It was almost like a musical phrase. A strange melody played on repeat, over and over again. Then, the iridescent sheen around Stoltz's palm began to glow. A circular aperture started to unfold outward from a central point, almost like a pupil dilating. No one could believe it. It seemed impossible. Inside was a complex honeycomb of polygonal shapes in constant motion, like a writhing pit of insects. The shapes became illuminated, and a bright beam of multispectral light shot out from the aperture. Stoltz had to cover his eyes. It was brilliant, like cosmic rays. The few believers among us equated it to getting a glimpse at God. But it was not God. The object was a quantum computer. The beam of light turned out to be the method of information transference, with the tiny photon particles carrying forth qubits. A sensor was rushed into the chamber to catch the constant stream of information spewing out of the newly named cosmic record. The immensity of the data was mind-boggling. There must have been exabytes, no, zettabytes, of data hidden within that thing. But the encoding was so complex and beyond our comprehension that it took a whole month to decode but one single gigabyte. Day by day, the qubits were analyzed by quantum physicists, and in the end they found two things: images and sound bites. 1 month later, we had images representing 34 distinct celestial bodies. There were planets, moons, potential Dyson spheres, each smothered in fields of light indicating sprawling civilized activity spread across the surface. Next, there were the axioms and equations, mathematics, written out not with numbers and symbols, but with shapes and patterns, diagrams. The simplicity of their communication proved that mathematics was not invented by humans. It is the fundamental structure of the universe, and the mathematicians were salivating. The patterns also held theorems for chemistry and physics that at a glance promised advanced levels of science humanity would not have discovered on its own for centuries to come. Then came the images for the anatomists, and the biologists, and the anthropologists. These were about as easy to understand as experimental abstract art. Were they photographs, or paintings, or microscopic images? Whatever they represented, it was beyond our human experience. The only similarity between each one was the distinctive spiral pattern in the corner, like an elaborate artist's signature. Observation was failing us, so I turned to impression. I felt I could see crowded streets full of grotesque caricatures squeezed together by slouched, monolithic structures. I was the only one in the room who felt a sense of dread. But of course my experience was likely coloured by the sounds. The engineers had created a listening booth, a closet-sized room with a single overhead light and a mixing station. I was escorted into the room and sat down at the desk and told to put the headphones on. There was a military computer with a track list. At that point they had decoded and reconstructed 80 sound files from the cosmic record. I was instructed to listen to them, identify the sounds, and give them labels. They left me alone in that booth, and I hit play. File 1. A high-pitched whining, a painful screeching, a collection of Aeolian sounds. I had no doubt it was the sound of a storm, high winds worse than anything Earth has ever seen. It was like I was in hell, listening to the collective wailing of a billion souls caught in eternal torment. I could feel those cries travelling the wind, sweeping over jagged mountains and through clefts in the stone carved by colossal claws. Track 29 sounded like a stream of liquid, hissing and wheezing, burning something. The rocky terrain, perhaps. Track 40 was a rumble, deep and cavernous, a moaning earthquake of proportions unknown, which transformed into the grasping, crackling sound of something growing, like the roots of a tree or the mycelium of a fungus. Track 52, the quiet, echoing sound of complete submersion in a deep, dark ocean. And I heard what could have been music, or even speech, pulsing whistles, clicks, and hums. It sounded like whale song. And below that whale song there was whispering. Ultimately, these sounds painted the picture of a nightmare world, totally inhospitable, uninhabitable, and yet home to someone. Fear grew like a cancer. One night, lying in our bunks, staring at the ceiling, I spoke with the astronomer, Alexis Peterson. So, what's the latest theory? Where are our new friends from? Well, the first planet was the simplest to locate. Analyzing the star patterns behind it, I noticed something familiar. It was us, the Milky Way, at the exact same luminosity and distance from which we see Andromeda now. Andromeda, that's the closest galaxy to our own. So these messages are literally our galactic neighbors? I haven't finished. When we started analyzing the next planet, we looked for the Milky Way again, to get our bearings. For a moment I thought I might have found it, but I must have been in a rush. It was not the Milky Way. It was Andromeda. And to be able to see Andromeda at that angle and luminosity, this second planet had to be in the Triangulum galaxy, about 750,000 light years from Andromeda. Okay, so they're galactic colonizers. Do you think they're originally from Triangulum or from Andromeda? You're not seeing where this is going, are you? The third planet is in galaxy M82, over 10 million light years from the Milky Way. The fourth in M101, 20 million light years away. Next, in NGC 1300, 60 million light years. NGC 4622, 200 million light years. 400 million light years. 500... The latest image we decrypted shows what we believe to be a Dyson sphere in... We don't know what galaxy it's in. We've never seen it. Wherever this Dyson sphere is, it is in the furthest, oldest corner of our observable universe, and there is no reason to believe that the spread of this civilization ends there. Night by night, there were fewer academics in the bar. What began as an atmosphere of nervous enthusiasm had become an atmosphere of dread. I quietly collected my drink and went to a corner where Professor Watkins, the mathematician, and Dr. Martinez, the quantum physicist, were in quiet conversation. They had dark rings under their eyes and tension in their shoulders. I sat with them, and Dr. Martinez gave me a melancholy smile. For 32 years, I've spent every single waking moment studying quantum physics. It's cost me my health, my husband's love, my daughter's trust, all so I could unravel the secrets of the universe. Now in just 3 months, every question I have ever had has been answered. simply written out in basic shapes and diagrams, as if they were as simple as Newton's laws. The answers to quantum gravity, field theory, Yang Mills, black holes. I feel like a child sitting in my first ever science class. My whole life. For what? Darnell shook his head. I feel the same way about mathematics. Hilbert's problems, the Millennium Prize. It's as if the questions which plague us are but trivial matters to these. I hesitate to call them people. They seem more like gods. Surely it's not that bad. Winnie took one final swig of her drink. If these gods truly understand the concepts they have communicated to us, then they have the tools to shape the universe in ways we can't even imagine. They could harness the power of a black hole. No, they could create black holes. They know how to find dark matter and use it like we use petroleum. They must be a type 3, maybe type 4 civilization. They may be able to harness all the energy in the observable universe. We are only seeing the tip of the iceberg. We haven't even decoded 1% of what's in the cosmic record. They must be so old and so powerful. They may have created life on Earth. Darnell might be right. They may be God. Our God. This immense knowledge was weighing on us like the gravity of the sun. We were getting a glimpse at a civilization that would consider us to be worth less than nothing, who could use their cosmic might to reach out and end our existence as easily as we could end an insect's. SETI's involvement in the project was going to be dissolved. The entire institution, as well as NASA, was going to be subsumed by the new military service created by joining together the Air Force and the budding Space Force. Projections showed that the US military budget was going to be tripled, and that half of that money was going to the new joint Air and Space Force. The cancer of fear had reached all the way to the seats of power in Washington. But their actions were futile. We scientists looked at the budget and laughed. What did their absurd numbers mean to cosmic gods? Only one person held on to hope. Bob Stoltz, who came into my listening booth with a smile on his face.
I believe I have cracked their language.
I demanded to know how.
It was difficult to identify that we even had evidence of written language, until I looked closer at the spirals in the corners of our images. Those aren't just symbols, they are paragraphs. A language not written from right to left or left to right or top to bottom. A language written from the middle out, syllabic and ideographic concepts swirling around a primary core. I would not have then been able to crack the code without my increasingly gloomy friends in mathematics and physics. I tell them all the time to cheer up. Yes, this civilization may be gods, but we have lived with the idea of gods for a millennia, since we first recognized ourselves as human. We are just now no different from Moses on the mountain, receiving the 10 Commandments.
He started drifting into a reverie, and I called his attention back to the present moment.
Aha, yes. Sorry. The scientists, they saw more and more of this spiral language accompanying the axioms and theorems. And by God, we broke it, my boy. We have their language. It is yet only a basic understanding, but we essentially created our own Rosetta Stone. We can read.
He took out copies of the images and showed me. The spirals were descriptions of the abstract-looking images, captions. One translated to Mines in the mountains of planetoid 3002938834. Population 17 billion. Primary export element 171. I gave the image a second look, and from the abstract mess a mountain emerged, looming and terrible, caught in the middle of a dense fog, swarming with something. Were these our new gods? The number 17 billion crept up my spine like a spider with icy legs. He read out another. Interior of Orbital Weapons Station number 23092343. Andromeda Galaxy. Population 3 million. Primary defense, singularity projectors. The image did not look like the inside of a spacecraft as we understand them. It looked like the inside of an organism, curved and irregular, and dripping. Once again swarming with creatures. Was this why these images were so hard to understand for so long? It's as if we were taking a microscope to a festering mass of flies, unable to tell where one ends and one begins. I needed to know. Why have you come to me with this, Bob?
My dear boy, I think we can use the written language to know what they are saying in our sound bites.
We spent the next month painstakingly matching syllabic concepts from the spirals to whale song audio files. It took us 10 hours a day for 40 days. We heard their greetings, their counting, their apologies, their gratitude, simple communication. It was relieving. The way they spoke to us, it didn't sound like the angry cries of wrathful gods. They sounded benign. Yet one thing plagued my mind, something I couldn't place. Until it came to me in the middle of the night. I shot out of my bunk and raced back to the listening booth. I flicked through the audio files and found the one I was looking for. The strange song played out loud by the object whenever a human being was nearby. The first thing this civilization of gods ever wanted us to hear. I pulled open the track and scrubbed through it, listened to the haunting sounds on repeat. I knew it. It was their language. A different tone to the whale song, but it was there. The cosmic record was speaking to us, whenever we went near. I pulled out Bob's translation index and started matching the sounds to concepts. And slowly I began to piece together what the cosmic record was saying, and my excitement turned to confusion. It can't be. I double-checked my translation. My confusion turned to dread. It was so much worse than any of my colleagues could have imagined. The message from our new gods was clear. It was one simple phrase, played over and over and over and over, and it said, "Help us, they're coming. Help us, they're coming. Help us, they're coming. Help us, they're coming. Help us, they're coming."